Yeah, stand back like right around here. That way this camera's. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the John W. Byrne Municipal Building here in Fuquay-Varina. This is being live streamed too for everybody that's watching. So I know you're in Fuquay-Varina, but for the ones that are watching. Fuquay-Varina is pleased to be able to host this public meeting regarding the study of the future 401 bypass. This evening, we have also our Mayor Pro Tem Larry Smith that's here and Commissioner Tracy Watson here in attendance from our town board. Also, we have our town manager, Adam Mitchell, and Assistant Town Manager for Development Services, Jim Seymour, our Public Works Director, Tracy Stevenson, and our Engineering Director, Matt Poling, in attendance. Our role tonight is to listen to the presentation delivered by Campo staff and any additional information provided for by NCDOT. Listen to the public that are here, both in person and virtually via Zoom. The town is not here to discuss any position other than to say that we support the need for a future 401 bypass, that we expect it to be funded and built in an appropriate time frame, and that we expect for the selected route to be effective at providing an attractive and usable alternative to existing Highway 401. A road, as we know, is becoming more and more taxed by drivers and commuters. I do want to acknowledge that I recognize that there are or may be property owners in attendance this evening that feel strongly about specific alternatives or lack of alternatives being studied. At the December Campo Executive Board meeting, I made a motion that was unanimously supported by the Campo staff to review alternative ideas from the US 401 corridor study, public comment period, and tonight's public engagement meeting to include consideration of an additional southeast route alternative and expansion of an existing roadway alternative to the current US 401 corridor study, and report back to the Executive Board of Campo with those findings. While this US 401 corridor study is ongoing and no later than the regular scheduled March Campo meeting that we have, Campo Executive Board meeting. My understanding from the town manager is that Campo staff is working hard on this effort, and to be clear, my goal by making this motion was for Campo to further demonstrate a good faith effort to consider the concerns and suggestions we have heard in the southern region of Wake County. I will not be tonight weighing in on a preferred or against a certain path. I am waiting for the study to conclude so I can have all the info to best make an informed decision as your mayor. With that, I'd now like to turn over our meeting to our partners with Campo and DOT to make their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Everyone hear me? Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kenneth Withrow. I'm transportation planner with the Capital Area Public Planning Organization. I'm also joined by our director, executive director, Mr. Chris Lucasino, as well as the consultant working on the project, Mr. Mike Saraski. Before I go any further, let me basically give you all our protocols associated with this meeting. Tonight's meeting contains a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. Due to the hybrid nature of the meeting, the public will be invited to participate both in person and virtually via Zoom virtual meeting platform. When it is appropriate, staff will call on those wishing to ask a question or make a comment that are attending in person, followed by those wishing to ask a question or make a comment via the Zoom platform. All attendees that have joined the meeting virtually have joined muted. If those joining virtually wish to ask a question or make a comment, they will need to notify the Zoom meeting host that they wish to speak. For the public's benefit that may be joining the meeting via the Zoom platform, please press the raise hand button in the Zoom app to notify the meeting host that you wish to speak. Please press star 9 to raise your hand if joining by telephone. After an individual has raised their hand, they will enter a queue. When the time for virtual participation begins, staff will ask the meeting host to recognize the individuals that have notified the meeting host they wish to speak by calling out their names or last 4 digits of their telephone number. Individuals will be unmuted one at a time and invited to ask a question or make a comment. Excuse me. We ask all those wishing to ask a question or make a comment to begin their remarks by clearly stating their name and address for the record. The public is asked to keep all comments to a reasonable time frame so that all that wish to speak can be heard in a timely manner. This concludes the protocol for tonight's meeting.
For our panel, if you're speaking to the mic, just bring the mic closer to you. That way we can pick you up and the audience can hear you as well. Bring the audience that may be speaking tonight, just speak closer to the mic so that it will pick up on the sound system. Thank you.
Thank you all. And so what I'll do is go ahead and begin the presentation. Just to introduce this, we thank you all for this opportunity. We've had a presentation in Harnett County, and so we wanted to be glad to give a presentation for the town of Fuquay-Varina. So just a quick overview. We began this project this time last year, or actually the beginning of December 2020. And the idea is to look at a 19-mile segment from Banks Road in Wake County down to 210 near the town of Lillington in Harnett County. And of course, we were looking at a 7-mile section of what we call the future US 401. The element associated with the project, of course, is planning, design, look at short and long-term solutions, and what would be identified as implementable projects that would be applied to the US 401 corridor study. The thing that I wanted to basically share with you all in terms of the study background is to identify the history of the 401 or future 401. It's been in what we call the thoroughfare plan that was originally created by NCDOT back in 1997. Statewide, of course, the state has been growing. There have been numerous plans that have been developed throughout the state, and in Wake County in particular, there was a host of projects that were included in that thoroughfare plan, and examples include 540, as we see right now, particularly that northern portion, and other projects. And one of those projects that was included in this was in terms of the thoroughfare plan, was a future 401 to the south and east of Fuquay-Varina. It's then been incorporated since that time in our long-range transportation plans, beginning with the 2025 long-range transportation plan, and now that we transitioned to a new name called the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, it's been included since then from 2025 through 5-year iterations to 30, 35, 40, and 45. Just to give you background with regard to the process, we are in the study schedule. We're in the planning process. And I think that's important to know that there's a timeline associated with doing these types of highway projects where we go through planning, design, eventual programming, to eventual construction and maintenance of the project. That's a long-term piece. Where we are is within that middle framework of the colored phases, where we have gone through a phase 1, phase 2, where we got a lot of input from the general public. We're now up to phase 3 in terms of the process, and eventually we'll come to phase 4, where we'll eventually have a final report with some recommendations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably talk about that a little bit more as we go even further in this particular study. And so what I wanted to also do was just to note what we're doing in terms of the study and what the appropriate study goals are. And of course, we noted those 4 outlines of goals and objectives. Okay, we wanted to outline some particular goals, and of course, that is one of the main goals, of course, is reducing congestion in this heavily fast-growing portion of our region, as well as look at a multitude of ways of getting around beyond just the highway mode. But in particular, we wanted to really address the congestion because this is a high-growth area. It has an impact upon the regional transportation system, and we need to continue to look at what we can do to improve that component. And so the next slide I want to basically share with you is what we're attempting to do is provide a multimodal framework that would accommodate growth and development through improved travel coordination that is safe and accessible while supporting economic development and maintaining the character and quality and livability of this particular area. Basically, if you have were involved in the Southwest area study that we did prior to this particular study, one of the things we wanted to do is take that into account, making sure that we had that multimodal framework, as well as look at growth and how to improve travel while maintaining a good quality of life, not only in the Southwest area, but also particularly in this area as we're doing this specific study. So next, we will quickly talk about design composites and the technical analysis. The consultant team that has been assembled to work on this particular study looked at a lot of constraints associated with this particular project. We looked at from historic properties to cemeteries, schools, the voluntary agricultural district, particularly in the southern and eastern portions of the county, the airport, places of worship, environmental constraints, the existing and planned developments, as well as property lines. So all those were key components and have been continued to be key components concerning this specific study. So all those factors have to take into account when we're looking at existing roadbeds, future roadbeds, and future possible highway segments or highway links. And so here's the thing that we wanted to let you all know. In that process, one of the things we did was take a look at the existing and future land use. As we can see, based on this particular study and what had been gathered, there is significant growth that has occurred in the area, and there continues to be significant growth in the Fuquay-Varina area into southeastern or southern Wake County, as well as into Harnett County. We expect this to continue as the triangle continues to grow and impacts growth throughout Wake County and the Collier County. And so it was important to really identify what was occurring in terms of the land use. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is this. Along with land use, let's note that as I've talked about the fact that we've had long-range transportation plans going back to 2025 all the way up to now, there have been planned projects in the area and there are future projects that are getting ready to come online and get ready to get started in the next few years. We see the list that is presented before us with regard to widening of Lake Wheeler Road. We're looking at the Hilltop Road relocation as far as widening NC 42 to 4 lanes, widening Old Stage Road to 4 lanes. We're looking at what can be done with regard to Fuquay-Varina Eastern Parkway, as well as 5751 and how that can improve in the junction near 4255 and US 401 north in the northern part of town, as well as the Western Andrew Bypass, which is R5705 that will be looking to be under construction this year. So there's a lot of things that are transpiring in terms of growth in this part of our county and in the Campo area. Let's see. And so the next thing we're going to go is into the future US 401, and basically is looking at alignment that has been a part of the LRTP and been in thoroughfare plans since actually 1999 in terms of being a part of the amended 1997 thoroughfare plan, but it's been in there at that particular time. So we're looking at it. We've been looking at a new alignment, how it crosses NC 42 and 55 and terminating at US 401 near the Wake-Harnett County line with potential extension to Piney Grove Rawls Road. And within that, what I wanted to basically share, what we've been looking at are various alignments. But before I get to that, one of the things we've done is we've done a traffic study in this area, and we note that with the inclusion of a future 401, however that alignment is, it shows that traffic is relieved on other local roads. We recognize that there are planned widenings in the area, yet it also denotes the fact that in light of the widenings and improvements that we have scheduled or planned in Fuquay-Varina into the future, that this road would help relieve that traffic on the local system in Fuquay-Varina and benefit the regional transportation system. And the next thing that I wanted to basically show you is how this road would facilitate traffic flow in Western Wake County. We're looking at the area from Raleigh, downtown Raleigh, or Raleigh through Research Triangle Park, and other portions of the southwestern Wake County. Because as you look at it, you see that it funnels, as we go southward, it funnels down and into Harnett County, impacting the road system there. So what happens is, if you're going north, there's a dispersion to Raleigh, the Research Triangle Park, and other parts west of and north of Fuquay-Varina, whereas coming south, of course, the main access is through northern Harnett County, particularly onto US 401. There we go. And one of the things that I wanted to also share with you is a part of this process, we not just looked at one singular alignment, there are a series of alignments that we've been looking at, and we've divided it into sections. Section A is basically from US 401 to NC 42, which is in yellow. Section B is from NC 42 to NC 55, which is in orange. And then Section C is that portion from NC 55 to US 401, and various alignments that would, of course, enter into Harnett County. So we know that, number one, we're already looking at various alignments. Number two, we recognize how it impacts not only Fuquay-Varina to its south and eastern portions, but also how it may impact Harnett County as well. And what I want to just basically show you very quickly are just some various alignments, intersections associated with the project where we're looking at it would be a partial controlled access facility with interchanges at US 401 near Banks Road, NC 42, NC 55. We've looked at ideas with regard to what is called a reduced conflict interchange intersection, and I want to show you what that looks like here. Did it change? Okay, good. Okay, and this is in Roseville, for those who have not had a chance to travel to the northern part of the county. There has been an improvement or creation of the Roseville bypass, And within that, we have basically a reduced conflict intersection that is created at basically Young Street and US 401 through, if you're in the area as far as a landmark, I could show you to the south is the Roseville High School, and to the north, you head into downtown Roseville. But that's one of the concepts that we would look to see apply here. There we go. And then we've looked at not only the alignments, we looked at developments and the growth that's occurring in this area. We're looking at probably 94,000 based on current projections of in terms of population in the Fuquay-Varina area, with a job growth of over to 22,000. And of course, in our area, in light of what's occurring, it could be more, but that's what we have in terms of general projections with regard to growth in this area. And then we have for you, of course, the alignments that we've just mentioned in terms of the impacts of the alignments and what they are shown in the MTP as far as alignment A1 and what alignment A3, how it follows Hilltop Road between US 401 and NC 42, and how A2, A4, and A5 are new alignments. And this is basically just a reiteration of what I had earlier mentioned. Okay, there we go. And the same basically applies to Section B as well as Section C. In particular, A1, B1, C1 basically follow the existing alignment that's in the current MTP. And the others are just variations in the general area for that would be studied for US 401 in terms of a future 401. And as I said, the same with regard to C, what could be done not only in terms of connecting to 401 and Piney Grove Walls Road in Wake County, but also alignments that are looking into Harnett County as well. In the process of doing this, we note trade-offs, and it's important to recognize. There we go. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. The last slide that I wanted to basically share with you is this. In the process of doing this study, there are trade-offs. We look at existing properties or how properties would be impacted. We look at agricultural, environmental, sensitive areas, and project cost. And depending upon the alignment, there are least impactful alignments and most impactful alignments. And that's something important that we wanted to note as it exists with the existing alignments that we have in this particular study. So the point is that I wanted to share with you is this, is that going back to that earlier slide where I highlighted all the constraints, and there were over about 9 constraints, all these constraints impact what would be trade-offs depending upon the alignment that would be chosen and determined for a future 401. So we're taking those things into account, and one of the things I just wanted to share with you as we get ready and close out the presentation is we wanted to look at future segments. Okay. What we wanted to basically do was just highlight the fact that in this process, yes, we have alignments that are presented before you, but we want to hear from you all, and as the mayor has outlined, we have been directed to look at additional alignments, including the southeastern section, where we would be gathering or reviewing data that had been done or reviewed in phase 1. We would be looking at that, looking at transportation modeling in the area. But yes, that's important, but we want to hear from you all, because I know that this has been an important study for you all, and I think it's important for us to gather as much information as we possibly can and continue to be transparent in this process and continue to be engaged with you all throughout this process. So without further ado, we're ready to begin our question and answer session. All of us here are available to take questions. We'll defer questions depending upon who the speaker is, but we'd like to hear from you all in terms of input, in terms of any possible alignments that would be useful or something that we need to study. So we thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to hearing your input at this time. So thank you very much.
We'll be your protocol so the public knows. Raise your hand, walk up, we'll see what happens.
Okay. What we'd like for them to do is, if you're joining via Zoom platform, please raise your hand. In the Zoom app, if you are using that, if you are using your phone, please press *9. If you're here in person and you'd like to come up to speak at the mic and ask a general question, please go ahead and proceed right now.
I think the plans I understood would be anyone in person would address their questions or make input, and then after anyone in person has had the opportunity to do that, then we would start fielding any virtual
Correct.
inquiries.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned as you begin, please make sure that you state your name and your address for the record as well.
Yes, my name is Robert Rubin, and my address is 728 Minerva Dale Drive in Fuquay-Varina. And I'm actually here, I'm also a member of the board, the vestry at Trinity Episcopal Church, which is on 401 south of town. And our property is very close to the existing 401, and we have questions about the schedule of the construction of the section of 401 out to the bypass from town, whether that's to proceed or follow construction to the bypass. And we also want to find out, we're just trying to get an idea, because if the road is widened as the current designs indicate, we would have to either move or demolish our current church structure to move it out of the right-of-way. And so we're trying to get a sense of what the timeline is for that part of the project. Thank you.
Sure.
So as Kenneth showed earlier on one of the slides, where we are in the process right now. So we're in the planning process, which is really the beginning of the process for any new project in the state of North Carolina. And that'd be great if you go back to that. Perfect. And that would answer that question. So there are a lot of steps that have to happen between where we are right now and seeing bulldozers in person. To give you a good example, a lot of you see the construction that's happening on 540 right now, that south section of 540. Where we are in the process on this project, we were 20 years ago on that project. So that should give you a good sense that there's a lot of steps that have to happen between now and when it goes to construction. As you can see on here, beyond this planning stage, there's programming. We have to make sure it's funded. None of these projects are funded right now for construction. So we have to go through funding, project development, which includes a federal process if we're asking for federal funds, design, property acquisition, and then we get to construction. So we can't give you an exact time frame, understand that, but most likely we're talking 15 to 20 years out into the future. For the existing sections, the section you're talking about, depending on the growth patterns and how things work out, it could be sooner than that, but Most likely it won't be. But what you can be assured of is that when it gets to that point and there's more in-depth discussion and you get into that programming, which is the next section, that there will be discussions with you, with your church, and we'll come up with solutions with the state DOT, with the local jurisdictions on how there could be a good solution for both the road to happen and for your church to stay alive and well. And so those discussions will happen. You'll have plenty more times between now and construction to be able to have discussions, figure out what the right solutions are, those sorts of things. You're welcome.
My name is Terry Jurgen. I live at 6325 Hilltop Road in Willow Spring. And I thank you for this chance to entertain our questions. I wanted to go back to the original placement, and I saw it was 97 to 99 for this corridor. Is there any data that exists that shows how that decision was made?
Thank you for that question. No, there is no particular data. It's basically maps. When I had come on board, and I'll just basically say, when we had the original thoroughfare plan, it was a thoroughfare plan. It was a map. And so what we did was we incorporated that map component into the 2025 long-range plan when we first developed that.
I guess my concern with that is we've seen substantial growth for the last 20 years, and particularly now that 540 is real. My question would be is that a legitimate starting point? Is particularly with what the gap is going to be between 540 and this start of the bypass at Banks Road. It seems like to me there's going to be a significant choke point there. So I'm hopeful that all the planners and the elected officials will be able to revisit and look at that and be sure that if you're going to stay on that path, that we don't box ourselves in between 540 and the start of this bypass, because there's going to be significant traffic there. So I would ask that you, at least if you don't have the data, if you could go back and try to create data that's today's date, not what we were thinking 20 years ago. That, to me, that would be a plus for this process.
Just want to add one thing, I guess, to respond to your question. So the data that was used for the map in 1999, kind of saying we don't have that actual data set, but every effort since then, as he mentioned, the 2025, the 2030, and every 5 years, every 4 to 5 years as those plans have been updated, the currently available data was used for those efforts and reanalyzed through a deficiency analysis, through a review of various alternatives, those projects from that previous plan.
So you have no concern about the potential gap between 540 and the start of Banks Road 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, when and if this thing is built. You're good with that?
Yeah, so that wasn't what I said,
Okay.
sir. What I did say was, your first question.
Okay.
In response to that question, our regional plan includes 700 plus projects. So the remainder of the 401 corridor, both north and south of 540, have other identified projects included in the plan that are traveling on their own paths compared to this particular corridor study. So
you
plans
feel like
for the corridor have, projects and improvements in the corridor from I-40 up in Raleigh all the way down to our boundary, which is, for ease of discussion, the river in Lillington. It zigzags down there, so if you look at a map, please understand that, have been identified. So, for example, there between future NC 540 that's under construction right now, there is what's indicated in our plan as project A619A, which is a widening from 4 to 6 lanes on US 401. There's projects A619B, which is another separate project that's identified in the plan for improvement, right? In addition to that, there's also projects that are identified for funding in the State Transportation Improvement Program right now. There's several of those, and they each have what's known as a STIP number, State Transportation Improvement Program number, that have been identified. Some of them are shorter-term interim improvement projects, and some of them are longer-term projects that will that are visioned to complement the other improvements identified long-term along
And
the
these
corridor.
that you reference specifically address the choke point between 540 and the start of this bypass. Is that true? And you can come back and respond later. I just want you to, with clear conscience, be sure that we're not creating a choke point between 540 and the start of this bypass. And please take your time to look at that if you need to come back. So, when you talked about the original placement of this corridor, and there was a modification or revision to it that you referred to, what was that revision? I thought I saw it on your slide that it was revised maybe from 97 to 99.
Okay. The original thoroughfare plan was developed in 1997. Okay. The Fuquay-Varina bypass, or Future 401, however we wish to name it, as it is shown in that thoroughfare plan, was included in an amended 1997 thoroughfare plan as of 1999.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm basically saying.
Okay.
So the original plan was 1997, statewide, Wake County. 1999, it is first shown in what is called the amended 1997 thoroughfare plan.
Okay.
So that's when it was done.
Good. We have, obviously, some of us have advocated to move this east and south, further east and south. Had you looked at any other options for that, or had you only looked at this corridor during the process of your study?
The options that Kenneth had showed earlier are a lot of the options we looked at, and I will tell you, we probably looked at a lot more than even those that were on there. As Kenneth mentioned, the first thing we did was we looked at the hard constraints in the area and tried to evaluate alternatives that made some sense considering those hard constraints. And that's the way that all these lines that you see up here got developed.
Okay. And in terms of what you're going to do going forward, do you have an idea of a couple of options already? Or are you only going to examine what's presented here or either in writing? Have you got any ideas?
You want to take it?
I was just going to say, the Campo Executive Board has wants us to use the input that we've received through the written public comment, through the public hearings that we've had in the fall and into December, and tonight, to help us identify what those other alternatives might look like and where they might be. So
Okay.
we're really here tonight, hopefully, to get input on what some of those other lines might look like.
And I don't want this to be the only option, but certainly my idea would be, and I'm assuming that your other projects are going to address this gap between 540 and where this would start on Banks Road. If they don't, then in my view, we ought to look at this bypass connecting somehow to 540 to make sure that it's a good transition for the bulk of the traffic that probably will be going and coming at that intersection. So to me, that would present an option to move this connection from Banks Road up to 540 in some way, whether it's at that primary intersection of 401 and 540 or whether it's east along the 540. And while it sounds like a fairly significant task to do that, I'll submit that when and if this thing's built 20, 30 years from now, we're probably going to have regrets if we don't do that. So at a minimum, if you keep it at 401 and Banks Road, I believe that with the growth that's already occurred, particularly what's happening along Hilltop Road, as we look 10 to 20 years out, the whole community, and particularly the taxpayers, will benefit from this bypass being further east and south. Now, is that a quarter mile? Is it a half mile? I don't know. Adam and I, we talked about this issue related to how far do you move the bypass, and will it restrict or inhibit cars from using it? Good point. If there is data on these alternatives that you've already developed about how many cars will use this bypass based on its current layout versus moving it east and south, if there's data developable that would show what cars would be inhibited from using it if it were out further, I'd love to see that. I don't know if your study will go to that detail, but we'd like to see that data. And if that theory works, Adam, that moving it out inhibits traffic flow, then to me, the same would work if you moved it closer. And it could work to the benefit if you moved it closer to Fuquay, if there's this relationship between who uses based on how far out it is or how close in it is. So I'd like you to be sure that you take a good look at these options, because I know how far invested we already are with the studies we've done and how far we've been invested back to 99 by laying this on a map. And I submit folks that laid it on the map in 99 had no idea of the growth that would happen between then and now. And that growth is probably even going to be exponential when and if this thing is funded. So let's don't be too short-sighted about how far out this thing needs to be. And I'd ask the town, and if you need time to look at this, the engineer, I'd love to see some analysis at some point about the value, the loss, and or the plus of having this bypass go right through the primary growth area of Fuquay-Varina. And to me, the growth has been so explosive out there that we kind of have outrun ourselves, and we probably will outrun ourselves yet again once this bypass is laid down, funded, and built. The growth of Fuquay will extend way beyond. And yet here's the Terrible Creek Waste Treatment Plant. Down at the high school, here's water and sewer. Close. Water's there, I believe. And must be sewer for the high school. And my point is, we're going to take this bypass of people we want to bypass Fuquay, and we're going to run this thing right through what will be the heart of where major infrastructure is. So I don't know if there's a way to analyze the cost of water and sewer and the adverse impact of giving that up to a bypass that doesn't produce any tax value to this community. There may not be a formula to do that, but I'd love to see that. So those are my general comments and questions, and look forward to continued input along the way. I've emailed a little more detail to all of you. If you would, please be sure that it gets in the record, or I can leave this. Okay, thank you.
I'm Joni Bowden. My residence is 7130 Turnerfish Road, Willow Spring. My siblings and I own farm property, several tracts on Walter Myatt Road that would be basically destroyed by the primary corridor that has been studied these many years. And I do want to thank Kenneth, and I want to thank Bonnie, Chris. They've always been very helpful in answering my questions, even through the holidays. And they've been dealing with me for many years, ever since this became a possibility when Congressman Bobby Etheridge got a little bit of money through DOT. And so I've been very fortunate to have your folks with Campo to answer my questions. And I've spoke at many public meetings and executive board meetings to express my family, the Bowden family's concerns on Waldemite Road. We've never wanted a corridor to affect our property. We have communicated that multiple times. Many of the points that Mr. Yergin made in his email, you know, we do endorse his email. And the Willow Spring Network has been very diligent and thoughtful in formulating our concerns and opinions. And I guess I have some maybe true-false questions. Is it true that a bypass, the point of this bypass, is to bypass traffic away from the town of Fuquay to keep it from being so congested? I'm assuming that's a true answer. That is the point of a bypass. And when you look at the 70 bypass at Clayton, that is approximately, just Google mapping roughly, that's about 3.4 miles from 70 business to 70 bypass at Highway 42 if you were to drive that stretch. That's basically how far those two legs are apart from each other. I submit that what's being proposed on the bypass for the 401 is significantly closer than that and would be driving traffic dangerously close to Willow Spring Elementary School and Willow Spring High School. And you typically don't want to see that kind of infrastructure with a bypass and exits and on-ramps or whatever y'all call them, the superhighway things nowadays, that close to our schools. Furthermore, if you were to measure perhaps from what we call 5 points, which is 401, 42, and 55, if you were to measure that point on a map, again, about 3.4 miles, using the 70 bypass as kind of an example at Clayton, it would put this bypass out to about where the Old States Road corridor would run. Now, if anybody driving down 401 today can see the infrastructure being built and the houses being built at Phillips Farm, which is this side of Old States Road, and there's other subdivisions going in this side of Old States Road on 401 where there's going to be hundreds of houses in there. So I would submit that Old Stage Road is not so far out, or a quarter in line with that. It's not too far out to attract people wanting to bypass Fuquay. And they're using it today for that very reason. I had to sit at the stop sign close to my house to get out onto Old Stage Road the other day and wait for 40 cars at 7 o'clock in the morning to come by. So they're already using it to get away from having to come in this close to town. So those are real life, I'm not an engineer. I'm just using common sense examples of looking at things. And we're having to look at them 15, 20 years into the future. Because I don't presume that Fuquay is going to expect developers to build this bypass. I think Fuquay will probably allow development along whatever corridor is ultimately selected. And they will protect the corridor and make that developer hold out that corridor, because Shelby Powell in August, publicly in the meeting, said the whole purpose of selecting the corridor is to require the local municipalities or the county to put it on the transportation plans and start protecting and prohibiting development within the corridor. But I suspect Fuquay will allow development along the corridor, but they'll require the developers to hold out that land and protect it. And that's what y'all telling us it's going to be 20, 30 years out. That's horrible news for us, because whoever has their property impacted is going to lose value as soon as this thing's slapped on a map as the determined route. Because if you did have to sell it to take care of yourself in your old age, like if I had to do, we have no plans to sell to any developer. We have no interest in that. But if I had to sell something to help take care of myself in my old age, that devalues the property. So I just want you to look at it from a common sense standpoint and not just focus on population growth. Mass transit is going to have to come, and Campo deals with mass transit issues, because you can't build enough roads to take care of all these cars if people are going to continue to be, headlong and headstrong to drive everywhere they go. And they're not walking. They're strolling around, but they're not walking to get to school. They're not walking to get to their job in mass. So this is an all-encompassing transit issue, and not just automobiles. It can't just focus on the automobiles. And, I have had conversations with, I think it's Wake Up Wake, that appears at some of your meetings too. I've had conversations with them because they're very interested, in the mass transit. And I've also tracked very closely the Highway 55 bypass around Anger in Harnett County and the Highway 55 widening project. And Kenneth and I had some communication about that. And I believe, that was a project that maybe Campo never actually mapped on a map as a bypass. It was listed in the list of projects, but it was never mapped. I think the first time I saw it mapped, maybe it was after DOT funded it, and they started having 2 options for the bypass around the east side of 55, 2 options for the bypass around the west side of 55. And then, of course, existing 55 was also considered as an option. So, I've got what Kim Gillespie, who handles that project with DOT, what she sent me, and I've studied that. So, these projects are similar, but things are changing in our world. And so we shouldn't continue, none of us should continue to repeat the same methods to the madness, so to speak, and sort of think outside the box. And I've always said I don't want this on our property. I repeat that again tonight. Bowden's Bend Cattle Farm, and my cousins have Bowden's Brothers Farm beside us. And we don't want it on our property. It needs to be further east and further south, because if Fuquay would build the Fuquay Parkway, it would take some pressure off of the exact same leg from 401 to Highway 55 down at Kennebec that they're trying to use this bypass for. So let's help Fuquay build the Fuquay Parkway. Those poor developers had to hold out that right of way when they bought that land and when they developed it. So that's a project that we need to help Fuquay get paved instead of growing up trees and weeds on it. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Dalthick Crawford, and I thought it might be helpful for all of the members to have you introduce yourselves again, because some of us came in late, but I do know Blake Masseyhill, and he came to my farm 2 times
Ma'am, can you speak in the microphone so that people online can hear you too?
Talk really loud.
Well, we also have the people online so they can hear too.
Wait, it says Kenneth Whitrow, and then
Mike Sarasky.
Chris Lucasino.
Blake Nassingham, Mayor of Fuquay-Varina.
Matt Bowling, Engineering Director.
yes, thank you so much, because I think it's important that we hear the people that are actually talking to us. And so I have a farm that may be impacted by the A section of the maps. And I've been in touch with Kim Gillespie from the DOT back, and she did the study back in 1997 and 1999, and she gave me her information that it was just not feasible to be funded at that time, and it's basically the same component that they're looking at now. So why reinvent the wheel when it was rejected the first time? But I have a farm that is impacted off of the A section. That is Pepperwood Farm, 118 acres, and it's we hay out about 60 acres that we do round bale hay for cattle farmers in our local area. Because of all the transportation costs, it's not feasible for local cow farmers or goat farmers to be getting hay from other sources, because it costs more money to ship the hay than it does the hay cost itself. So I would like to ask the people in the room here, how many people actually work their land? Because I do. I mean, I do. Look at this. Look, I mean, I do. I've had 4 broken fingers, a broken wrist. I mean, it's a lot to farm your land. And I have 3 boys, and my father grew up on a cotton farm in northern Alabama. And so he knows the amount of resourcefulness that it takes to run a farm. And so that's what I'm trying to do, and to keep it for my boys. And so what I wanted to impress upon the board of Campo is that we are producing a boarding horse farm for basically 62 horses or 60 horses. And also it's 118 acres, and we hay out the rest of the land so that we can have round bales for cattle farmers, goat farmers, whatever, that need to come pick it up at cost. We just want to provide that for the people, and that we have spent over $4,249,085.24 in the last 4 years at our farm that we expend, that are expenses to pay for all of the vendors that we use at Fuquay. And that's not even counting the boarders that board at our farm, that have horses at our farm. That's just me running a business at a farm. I'm not talking about the 40 or so people that board the horses at my farm, that use the farriers, that use the veterinarians, that use the showing, and that use they go to the Fuquay Food Lion, they go to the dry cleaners.
Meredith,
all their money.
Meredith, when you and me got together, we spent a lot of time on both occasions talking about exactly what you're discussing. And I know some people you mentioned came in here late tonight, but this portion of the meeting is for question and answer with these gentlemen from Campo and DOT, and that's what they're here for at this portion of the meeting. So if there's any questions for them, that's who we have here tonight to be able to answer anything. So please address them any questions that you may have for tonight.
Well, I just hope that that Fuquay-Varina doesn't get sideswiped by this grandiose idea of multimodal, or whatever you want to call it, with the bikes, the bike paths, and I realize that's where the federal money is. That's where the federal money is, and that's where you have the funding, and it's already there, and it's just, Fuquay is the golden child of the federal government right now to pass on all these funding. And so, but nobody wants to ride their bike from Fuquay to RTP, or to the Capitol for 17 miles in 95% humidity. So I realize that's part of the deal, and I'm not going to fool myself. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Well, I was going to ask one thing real quick. Could you
sir.
give your address? We got everything else. We just
5544 Dunalley Drive, Dunallie, Dunalley Drive, Fuquay-Varina, 27526. And I'm so glad that you would have an in-person meeting, because that means the most to me, because I've been to all the Zoom meetings, and this is very important. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Meredith.
I want to mention one thing real quick, Meredith, if you don't mind, come back here for a second. I want to point out just if you can see the map in front of you, that's your property in yellow, correct?
Yes, like 4 out of 5.
Okay, so that the one right there that's in yellow, that's a longer kind of piece right there.
But they're all yellow. What are you talking about?
Yes, the dark gray.
Up towards the top, between A2 and A5. That's your property, right? Okay. So the one thing I want to mention, and this is also going to answer a question. Joni, you didn't ask this question, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it anyway. But this is very similar to you. When we looked at hard constraints, Kenneth mentioned this earlier in his presentation. One of the things that we looked at was property lines and trying to stay as close to property lines as possible. And so you see here that the alternatives that we're looking at in the area of your property, what we're probably going to end up with, and what we're looking at mostly, there's that A1 because that was the original MTP line. But if you look at A2 and A5, they're literally on the ends of the property. And so what we're talking about typically is about a 200-foot wide stretch of right-of-way that would be needed for this project in the future. So if we're looking at, and just to let you know, we are seriously taking this into account. We put every property line on our maps. We look at every property line on here. We look at how every single one of these alignments affects every single property and every single property line. And we want to try and keep it as close to property lines as possible. And so I just wanted to mention that. I just wanted to make sure you understood and saw that the alternatives that we're looking at here through your property, but really on the edges of your property, we're trying to stay to the edges as much as possible to give you as much usable land left over when this project is done.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Tell me your name again.
It's Mike Saraski. I'm a consultant with Campo for the project.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Teresa Furr, Director of Wake County Soil and Water Conservation District. My address is 8105 Kinsella Way, Willow Spring, North Carolina. One of my questions I have, and then I'd like to just have a couple of comments as well with my job. We do administer the voluntary ag districts in Wake County. Hopefully we'll have some enhanced voluntary ag districts soon and some conservation easements as well for farmland protection. Because that is a concern of our office for us and helping farmers as well. But when you're looking at the different segments, say A1 through 5, Kenneth, you were talking about some areas had minor impacts, some had major impacts, looking at that and trying to determine that. My question is, who wins on that? Do you try to do a delicate balance to make sure one is not impacted more than the other? Do you kind of in between? Or how does that determination make, say, my interest is in agriculture land, in farmland. You all know that. So I want the routes that have the least impact to the farmland and to the farmers and agriculture land. And when you're looking at that A through 5 and having low impacts to that, I guess my question is, who makes that determination? Who has the final say-so when you're looking at impacts to try to reduce those? And who wins on having the least or the most impacts?
Thanks for that question. I'll let, if you want to answer that question.
Yeah, I can answer it. That's fine. So during phase 2, we actually had a survey that asked that question. And Kenneth talked about the trade-offs that looked at this, trade-offs of, taking property versus environmental impacts versus, building takes, things like that.
Right.
And so what we took from the public is that property impacts were the most important concern. Mm-hmm. And so when we're looking at taking this to those next steps to look at those alternatives even closer, we're taking that into account. And so, yes, there is a balance, right? There's always going to be a balance. We can't plow through every environmental feature, but if coming up with going through an environmental feature is going to save something, and yes, it'll take more time or maybe some more cost to do it, because of the survey that we got, we'll do it that way.
Okay.
And so the determination's being done by the survey that we got from the public, but also what makes sense from an engineering standpoint and from a cost standpoint. I mean, some of the survey ideas, I mean, some of the responses we got in the survey said that people were willing to pay a little bit more to, not hit a certain property or hit a certain property type.
Right.
So we are very much taking into account the trade-offs that were discussed in that survey.
Okay, that's good. And my only comment with that, and with regard with farmland is each one of you said with the numbers, this is due to a growing population. We have more people moving here. I think Wake County and the planning department, when they released that, said 62 people to Wake County every single day. We're going to have that. And my thought to that is we still have to feed people. We still have to clothe people. We still have to have agricultural land to support people. You're going to have an influx of people and a lot of population, but my question to you is how are we going to feed them? What agricultural land is going to be left to be able to provide food and fiber for these people? In transportation costs to Israel, and so there has to be a delicate balance, because if you do want to have a great place for people to come and live, which Wake County is, that's what draws people here, is having that balance. Mecklenburg doesn't have that anymore. They have lost all the farmland. They have lost all the agriculture. Nobody really wants to live there anymore. But this rural setting, it is what draws people here to make it a great place. And we've got to preserve that. We still have to have an emphasis and with elected officials and stuff to want to have that. We still need a delicate balance of both. We don't need everything to be in houses, cluster subdivisions, and asphalt. We still need to have working farms, agribusinesses, and people that support the economy as well. We do need to have that balance. And so I guess my comment to y'all is to please take that into consideration when you're looking at these routes, is that still having a viable economy in the farms working for people to be able to feed people that are moving to this area. Thank you.
My name is Jerry Bradley. I live at 111 Devereaux Lane, Fuquay-Varina. DOT did a study a number of years ago. I sent a recommendation at that point to move this bypass, for lack of a better description, down 55 and off and hit 210 going into Lillington. It's a shorter route. The other comments about Old Stage Road also apply. So that's my preference. All of these A1 routes, and that's all I'm familiar with, the A routes, by the time you build those, all they're going to do is be feeder traffic for the homes that are already developed. So these are just my comments. You're not going to solve Fuquay's problem with traffic until you find a solution to two major highways divided by a railroad and controlled by 4 intersections. Till you solve that problem, you're going to have a mess here. It's not going to change. You can put bypasses east, west, and otherwise, and you still got a mess. It's not going to change. So there's some pretty smart engineers that I think can give you a solution. You won't like the price, but they can give you a solution. Now, on September 30th, I heard this similar presentation at Northwest Harnett. It was pointed out at that time that the Campo study had bad data. A week later, the Harnett County planning people had a presentation. They said in a public meeting they had been trying to get Campo to correct this data for 18 months, and it hadn't been corrected. The data still hadn't been corrected. In my 45 years of engineering, I have yet to see a problem or a project that starts with bad data that ends up with a good solution, unless it's just plain luck. And I've never had luck work on my side at that point. Now, I brought property. I grew up here in Fuquay. I was away and I bought a farm here 50-some years ago. I bought that farm to move back to live on, to raise my kids, and to die there. I don't want your road through my property. Now, I realize that you can put it through there through condemnation, but I can tell you I don't want it there. Now, there's a lot of other people that feel the same way about their property. The people who sold their property for development, fine. That's their business. But I don't want it. So you can go somewhere else. Now, one thing that aggravates me is looking at the Campo plan. Fuquay excluded South Main here. And the reason they excluded it is right-of-way wasn't available. Well, if you can say right-of-way is not available, why can't I? Thank you. And I wish you would correct that data. You haven't done it yet. Serenity at Rawls is a big development. That's not even in your data set. So how are you going to have a good project with bad data? Thank you.
Howdy. Jacob Pierce, 7120 Panther Lake. If you'll navigate to the slide about the constraints with weighing each of the A, B, and C as far as costs and impacts go. I think it's a few forward. It was the last one. That one there. So how are you actually weighing each of the constraints? Personally, I've been hearing a lot from B3 tonight and A3 as far as Hilltop, Walter Bryant, Kennebec. How are you going to weigh? I see that it's cheaper on the cost to run that route, but it's also impacting the greatest for properties and ag. So are those equally divided, 25% each, or?
No, as I mentioned earlier, we are taking property impacts into a higher account when we're looking at what's more important, because that's what we heard in the survey. And just to let you know, when we looked at the impacts of, so let me take a step back. In the phase one section of this, which was basically the introduction of the project to the public, one comment we heard a lot from the public was, can you use existing roads as one of the alternatives? And so we did. So the three alignments, A3, B3, C3, are only using existing roadways.
Right.
And so we listened to the public, and we wanted to make sure we put that into the phase two section of this project and look at that as an alternative, because that was a direct comment from the public in the first phase of the project. When we started looking at those impacts, widening a 2-lane, typically 60-foot right-of-way roadway to a 4-lane, 200-foot right-of-way is a massive impact along those existing roadways. We're talking probably a lot more building takes than if we look at, what would be considered, going along property lines or at back of properties or things like that. And so what we're actually finding is that through our analysis is the existing roadways is actually more impactful than the other alternatives.
Okay. Well, all I'm seeing tonight, and this might be anecdotal, but I'm just seeing a lot of people talking about the routes from A3 and B3, hitting those from Walter Bryant, Kennebec, and Hilltop. I think the further we stay east and south, the better, because the closer we're getting to Fuquay here, the more we're hitting people we're seeing here tonight. I had another question too. The Hilltop Road relocation, and it might be off topic, but what's that entail? Like, is that being moved, or does that have to do with this study? Is that too off topic?
Sorry, I'm taking a note.
The Hilltop Road, the bonus occupation project.
Yes, that's a separate. That's a separate project that is being funded with some funding that was provided to the region to help with some of the changing traffic patterns that have been identified as a result of NC 540 being built. And so that project is still going through, and they're looking at different alternatives as well. for where that might be
Okay,
realized.
so you don't know yet. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
And just to give you an update on that, they're probably going to have public meetings either in, most likely it's going to be March. There's two separate Hilltop projects. There's the Hilltop Relocation, which is right now if you drive it through 401 at Hilltop Needmore, it's a 5-star. That's what I call it, the 5-star intersection. Taking that section of Hilltop, moving it further south to actually relocate it to 401.
But regardless of this study, that's not going to impact where that
No.
goes. Okay.
Those two projects have nothing to do with this.
Okay. I guess once you guys decide on a potential path, how many years on the line would you go back into the impact study for this? I mean, 5, 10 years, 15 years, or is that?
As far as traffic,
Yeah.
right now we're looking at 2045.
Okay.
That's what, and we're doing traffic analysis on this project for 2045. Now, Campo's in the process of, with the update of the MTP, of creating the 2050 model. So once that 2050 model is complete, obviously, looking into the future, we'll probably look at 2050.
Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. We didn't get a chance to get your name and address again. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Jacob Pierce,
Jacob Pierce.
7120 Panther Lake.
Thank you.
Yep.
I didn't get to recognize, thank you, sir, very much for your comments.
Yeah. Thank you.
I didn't get to recognize, not in regards to you, go ahead and sit down, I'm sorry. I didn't get to recognize earlier, at the time somebody came in and would like to have a chance to speak. We have a North Carolina Representative, Aaron Prey here. Aaron, Representative Prey, would you like to come forward and have any comments? Hope you're doing well tonight. It's always good to see you in Fuquay-Varina. We're always happy to have you here.
It's always good to be here.
Thank you for everything that you've done for our town.
My pleasure. Happy to support Fuquay and happy to support the constituents of District 37. I'm Erin Perret, and I'm your representative to North Carolina State House, representing Southern Wake County. Thank you for having me, and thank you for answering my questions. Believe it or not, I have a hard stop at 8 o'clock. I have to get on a conference call for the legislative business. Never ends. So I'm going to try to be brief. I look forward to your answers, and if I have to come back and ask more questions, I will. So thank you so much for working with me. I've been working with and communicating with the people of Southern Wake who are impacted by the plans of the 401 bypass for quite some time. And there's some things that I'd like to seek clarification on, if you would. This has been going on for 20 years, right? So these plans have been in place. This has been something that you've been looking at for the last 20 years. If you had to go back and improve something as far as the notification process for property owners, what would you improve? And how do you plan to fix any of those perhaps missteps or something you've overlooked in not providing proper notification for property owners that their property would be impacted for future corridor studies or possible corridors? How would you go back and fix that? Because I think that is a real sticking point, one of the sticking points with property owners here in Southern Wake, that they haven't been properly respected and notified that their property was going to be impacted by these plans dating back decades.
So generally, as a project moves through that project development cycle that they talked about earlier in the presentation, at the beginning, there's much broader input that's solicited. It might be through, well, nowadays it would be through social media, through web pages, through media stories, if the media is willing to run those stories, through our local partners, if it's coming from Campo. And as a project gets closer to, or once it does get funded and it starts going through design and environmental review, and they have specific properties that have been identified to be impacted, they'll typically begin to do individual mailings to those properties. But at the outset, so perhaps 20 years ago, they didn't have some of those tools. So those are absolutely tools that we use today when we're doing these projects. And in fact, for this study, at each phase, there's been a summary of all of the engagement efforts that have been utilized. And I think that those types of efforts would continue with this project or other projects. whether or not a project would have specific mailings to each individual address in a large study area is really dependent on each project. So for this project, or for 540, for example, initial corridor planning there was done very broadly, and as it reached the point where it was starting to go through the environmental review process and design where they had more discrete corridors to look at, that's when more precise engagement efforts were utilized.
Don't you think that if there's a public map out there, you have a piece of property, say you have a piece of property on a map somewhere, and someone who's in a position of authority sticks a line on a map right through your property. No one tells you it's there. How does that impact how you treat your property, how you perhaps plan to sell your property? And then it comes later on, years down the road, that someone comes to you and says, hey, did you know that your property's on a map with a planned bypass through it or a road? That would irritate you, wouldn't it? Do you think that's fair? I'd like to see a show of hands of people here who may have been in that situation where your property is on a map and there's a bypass through it and you don't know about it, but you hear about it years later. I think there may need to...
Look at the hands.
You're not legally required to do that. But as a courtesy, I think there needs to be an improvement there. Don't you agree? I'm asking you. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think we're always looking for new ways to engage the public and get them to participate in our processes. Our Campo, I'll let the town speak for what the town does if they want to, but for Campo, we have a public participation plan or policy document that guides what we do, for whether it's our metropolitan transportation plan, whether it's a corridor study like this, and that is periodically reviewed and updated with different techniques, different practices. So, I think that's one area where you're never at a point where you're going to say we have the perfect process or the perfect set of tools. That's going to continue to hopefully improve and evolve.
Just a yes or no answer from you. And I don't mean to make this stressful, of course, but from the value of farmland to the environment and the local economy, you would have to see that there's value there, right? Correct?
Yeah.
In preserving farmland, and do you agree with that, or is that part of your decision-making process?
Yeah, as Mike stated earlier, that's absolutely something that we've heard from the engagement and from the public this last round.
But do you believe that?
Yes, we do. Mm-hmm. We also understand and agree that value on existing homes and businesses and wetlands and streams and across the breadth of the different what's commonly referred to as resources, whether they're natural or human resources, all have to be, we try to identify all of those and then have to weigh the impacts, because there's always impacts on those, and as you've seen already from the presentation, a low impact on one might have a high impact on another. And so there are decisions that have to be made about balancing those impacts, and we take that very seriously.
Right, and it is a growing area, I understand that. I think we all understand that. This is a great place to live. A lot of people want to come here. They want to live here. They want to work in the area, and that creates challenges in mobility that is on you to solve. I understand that. Equally, though, there is a very profound and important benefit of preserving farmland and the generational value of these family lands that you're hearing so much about. And I want to make sure that you understand that when we put these plans in place, this just isn't a line on a map. These farms aren't just a bunch of green space that belong to somebody that might be affordable or cheaper for a development project for roads. This is personal, and this is emotional, and this is devastating. Devastating. to these people, devastating to them. I mean, they have businesses on this property that contribute to the local economy, which affects other businesses in the area. So I can't put enough emphasis on that fact enough, and I want you to be able to, I know you recognize that, but I want to hear from you that you recognize that. I also want to understand, for what I'm hearing today and what I've been hearing for months is the request for Campo and metropolitan planning organizations and perhaps the town of Fuquay-Varina to look at alternate routes, maybe that you haven't studied before. Maybe you have studied them before. But the people here need to have the the faith in the process. And so if there are areas that you don't have data that you can provide us, that you haven't looked at for an alternate route for a bypass, we've heard that maybe one of those suggestions is the south and the east. I'd like to hear a commitment tonight from you that you will look at that. Or if you've already looked at that you will provide us that data that you've gathered from studying those alternate routes in those areas requested by these impacted property owners. Will you commit to that tonight?
The Campo Executive Board has committed us to that, to look at least two other alternatives, one utilizing some portion of Old Stage Road, and one that has been, through the motion that was unanimously adopted, a eastern and southern alignment that's yet to be determined. But one of the marching orders we got from our board was to come in tonight to listen to other ideas and then to look at that along with technical data once we have other ideas to see what is viable out there and whether something else will work or not.
What do you need from us to make a commitment that you will look at other alternate routes?
I'm not sure can you ask your question again? I'm not sure
Sure.
I understand.
What I'm looking for as a result for tonight is I'm looking for a commitment from you to look and study, as part of the corridor study, alternate routes as suggested by the property owners. Will you do that?
So we're here tonight to listen to different ideas, to take a look at those ideas, essentially looking at what was categorized as phase one levels of analysis in the study so far, to bring that back to our board. And if they decide that they want us to then take any of those other ideas and move them forward to the phase 2 and phase 3 levels of analysis, then we would do that. But that's ultimately going to be their decision. We are committed through their direction to look at other alternatives and bring information to them. And that's what we've committed to do.
Are there any members of the Wake County Commission on this call right now? How many of you live in the Fuquay-Varina ETJ? If you live in the Fuquay-Varina ETJ, can you vote for the Fuquay-Varina Town Council? So who up here is looking out for them? One person. Do you think that makes sense? So I'm interested in the process. That's what I'm here for. I'm also interested to understand, if I can't get a commitment from you tonight, what is the determining factor for the board to decide what they're going to study? Is it a, quote, viable route? If it's a viable route, how is that viability determined? Is it a computer program? Is it a set of metrics? Is it an opinion? And if it is an established procedure with metrics and a computer program, can I go see it?
So make sure I remember all of your questions here that you just asked.
I'm looking for what determines viability of a route.
So we will be looking at many of the same things that were looked at in phase 1 for these alternative alignments that you've already seen in the study. Right? So we'll be looking at things like traffic that's forecasted for a particular alignment. We'll be looking at that future population and employment information. Those are things through our regular analysis process that we're required to look at.
Traffic's going to exceed what you think.
Okay.
You need to go further east and further south.
So, but my question is it an objective metric? Is it a computer program, or is it you sitting around a table? I mean, that's okay, but I want to understand how that's determined.
So any recommendation that came from the staff would ultimately be staff and the project team looking at the data that was analyzed. But there is data that will be analyzed. Computer mapping data, traffic forecast data for the future and today. We'll look at existing traffic forecasts. We'll look at something, for example, Old Stage Road. If we have a 200-foot wide corridor, it's going to impact things that are on Old Stage Road today. How many of those things might be impacted, right? No matter where you put the line, it's going to impact something. So we'll look at all of those things. Mm-hmm. And then we'll bring that information back to our board with or without a recommendation from the staff on whether or not it makes sense. And I think for us to say something makes sense, we're probably going to need to see that it's going to have the type of improvements that would meet those goals of the study. So improving traffic on 401 in the future, or alleviating future congestion on 401 by providing this other route for the through trips. And probably looking at, well, we would be looking at the other resources, again, natural resources, human-created resources, cultural resources, and the level to which those are potentially impacted by each of those other lines that are drawn. And then also cost. We'll look at cost as well. Based on that, when we bring back what we have in March to our board, they'll have the opportunity to say, here, take these alignments that you came up with, that you've analyzed, that you've done this, we'll call phase 1 analysis on, and expand the scope of the 401 study to include those additional alignments. Or we could see that they don't make sense. Maybe it's too far out to help with traffic on 401 in the future. Or maybe it would look as though it would be an extremely expensive project. And they may say, that's not something that we feel like is worthwhile to look at. And then that's where that would stop. But we've committed to bring those back to our board and allow and then they have the opportunity to decide to have us study further those other alternatives. That's what we've committed to do. So
that data that goes back to the board is compiled by you based on what? Where are you getting that traffic data from, all of that data from, and is that publicly available?
Yes, so
before the decision is made to bring it back to the board.
Yes, the resource data, whether it's property data from the counties. I say counties because this could very well take an alignment that goes into Harnett County, not just Wake County. That's readily available to the public right now. You can get to it on the internet. Existing traffic counts, we'll get those from NCDOT, and if we determine that there is some need for an additional traffic count, then we would look at trying to capture that traffic count. Usually through using a traffic counting firm that would go out and get that data. But once we touch that data, that's publicly available data. It's in the public record. It's in the public realm. Does that answer your question?
That answers my question.
Okay.
I wanted to just restate the fact that there's no member of the Wake County Commission on this call or here tonight. I think that when we talk about destroying somebody's property and changing their lives and the lives of their children and grandchildren, they deserve the utmost in integrity in the process. And I think we have a problem here because we have a problem there too. But I think, I'm not sure that the members of the Campo board are the mayors of Wake County, right? Or the Campo area. Is that right? Can you tell me, can you explain to me who makes up the Campo board real quick?
I myself am a member of the Campo board. You have list all your other executive board members, mayors of surrounding Wake County and Harnett County Board of Commissioners.
Currently, it's the mayors of the municipalities in Wake County, Northern Harnett, Western Johnston, Southern Franklin and Granville counties. It's also a county commissioner from each of those counties.
Okay, so there are some members of this board that really aren't impacted by this issue at all, right? Or not as much as the impacted property owners who are sitting in the audience today. Is that a correct statement?
I
think
don't
that's
know.
probably a correct statement. So I guess my point is, from a process standpoint, we have people who are making decisions about this issue that are not intimately involved in the actual real-life impact of these decisions. I think that's pretty much a correct statement, don't you think? I'm just asking you what your opinion is. But from a notification standpoint, from a process standpoint, and from a commitment standpoint, I'd like to see a little bit more. So we have people here who actually essentially don't really have a voice. They don't have a vote. They don't have a voice. You're hearing what they're saying, but I think they deserve a commitment from you to seriously look from a metric data standpoint, from a transparency standpoint, alternate routes before you make decisions that completely destroy, in some cases, their lives and their income. It's not just a piece of land, it's who they are. And I should probably go. I'm 15 minutes late for my call, but I'll be back and I'll listen more. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Perret. It's always good to see you, my friend. Talk to you soon. Bye.
My name is William Cole. I live at 8804 Walter Myatt Road. I live down the road from where the Bowden family has a lot of their crop farm. And from what I saw on the internet, wanted it going right straight down through the center of their farm, taking out a barn, a pond, coming real close to the post office and the elementary school, cutting across Eddie Howard Road. Now, I don't know if they're going to cut Eddie Howard Road in half and just have to go in from either end or what they're going to do with that. And then they're going to cut across another field, down through some wetlands, over another couple of ponds, and then they're going to hit Kennebec Road, where there's like 4 ponds right where they're talking about going through some guy's tree farm and some other stuff. The question I have is, have any of you ever been sitting out there when people are here saying that we're going to put something through your property or we're going to try to take your property in the ETJ or something like that? Have any of you been in that position that these people are in? I take that as a no. Thank you.
Folks, last fall, I was asked when I was elected for mayor to ask Campo and DOT if they would do one of these 401 corridor studies in Fuquay-Varina and in person. And some of y'all in this room asked me to try to help facilitate that, and I did do that. They are not required to be here tonight. They came here trying to help and listen to members of our area. And so if we continue, this is not the place to hoot and holler on each individual ones, or they'll get up and leave. They're not required to be here. So let's continue to put input, but try to get everybody's comments addressed and spoken for tonight too, because I do know all y'all would not like to be here until midnight. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your time tonight. My name's Thomas Dean. I live at 7840 Kennebec Road, which is beside the schoolhouse, the Will Spring School. If you'd like to pull that up.
It doesn't pull up that stuff. It's just a presentation that they have up there.
We'll pull up the A section.
You enlarged it a while ago.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll pull up the A section where you
Okay. All right. But to begin with, I'm also a member of Farm Bureau here in Wake County. I sit on the board, and it is our stance that you look for as many opportunities to use existing roads as possible to leave working farms alone. And that's also with, I'm also with Wake County Soil and Water. I'm the chairman of that board. And as Teresa has mentioned, also, please use the existing roads that are there as much as possible and leave the working farms alone. Now, talking about my piece of property, you said a while ago that it was your intent to use property, to stay on property lines and to use existing roads. Is that right?
What I said earlier is that when we are doing these alignments, we are trying our best to go down property lines as much as we can.
Okay. Well, my property, you decapitate the front end of it. And so my question here, and I've asked this before and didn't get a good answer, with this road being built, am I going to be allowed to put driveway pipes on this road to connect to my property? Because you're going to cut me off from the road.
I mean, as far as I understand it, yes. I mean, it's this.
I mean, I won't know.
Bob, do you want to answer that? Is that something you can answer? Because this is really a DOT, more of a DOT. I would imagine. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Bob, but I imagine this is more of a DOT question. I apologize.
Okay, my property is, let's say it's oblong. This road comes right through the front end of my property. It decapitates. It cuts me off from Kennebec Road completely. Not to mention it goes right through my daughter's house. So my question is, am I going to be able to put driveway pipe on that road to connect my property, which is all of a sudden become landlocked? Or can I access this new road?
We don't leave property landlocked.
Right.
So there would be, the design folks would find a way to make a connection for you somehow. I mean, it's probably not going to be right where it was, or it is now. But, you know, they work as best they can to provide you a reasonable accommodation to get back out the road.
And are you asking now with the line, or are you asking in the future when it's constructed?
If it were to be built where the lines are showing now, the one line comes right through my property, like I said. So if that road were to be built, that's what I'm asking. Would I be able to access my property, or the public be able to access my property?
Yes. As Bob said, the DOT cannot leave any property landlocked. They cannot deny you access to a public road.
And how is that defined? I mean, if you're going to destroy my property, let's say I want to go ahead and develop it. Am I going to be allowed to develop that property and have access to that road?
I mean, it depends on when you get closer to the project development phase of this, get more detailed about what the road is, where it is, what the impacts are. And as far as whether you develop or not, that's probably more regulation of the municipality that you would be in contact with. So that would be with the town, would be my guess. But I would say it depends. I mean, we can't give you a black and white answer right now because, again, it's one of the lines on the map. It's not the line on the map. We have not decided what that line is going to be yet. And so we cannot give you an exact answer. Right. But I guarantee you that the people that would be working on this, whether it's DOT, whether it's a town, whether it's a consultant, they would work with you and make sure that, you know, that there's an outcome that would satisfy you.
Right. Well, I'm not just talking about me. Whoever this property, this road comes through their property, it does the same thing to more than just me. But I have another question. When is the last phase of Highway 55, the Highway 55 widening, when is that to be complete?
Okay. Are you talking about the C section?
That's right. From Harnett County to 401.
I don't believe that's programmed. I think that section is actually not programmed yet for widening, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what about the Fuqua Expressway?
Are you talking about the?
And why is the Fuqua Expressway not even shown on these maps?
Are you talking about the Fuquay-Varina Parkway that's on the Fuquay's plan?
Yeah.
Is that the one you're talking about?
I guess. I gave property, 3 different properties to the town of Fuquay. It was called the Expressway then. I don't know why it's called a Parkway now.
So the parkway is on the maps, and I do believe that it is incorporated in the study. And even with the amount of traffic that's forecasted, not only do we need the Eastern Parkway, but we are also going to need the bypass as well. And so,
well, I mean, you're saying that the 55 extension, you don't even know when it's going to be built?
It's not funded in the next 10 years. That's the right answer.
It's not funded.
In the next 10 years.
Well, what about the Parkway?
yeah, the parkway is not funded in the next 10 years either.
Okay, because I mean, common sense tells you if you had both of these highways in place, that this bypass could be pushed way out. So I'm really dumbfounded as why it's not already been pushed out.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Why is it not being pushed out already?
Why
you got two corridors. I mean, we all know that when this 55 project is completed and we've got all this traffic coming in and we're going to bottleneck down to 55, it's going to have 2 lanes, right? What you call a suicide lane. You got to turn the lane in the middle. It's going to be congested like unbelievable. I can't believe it. I'm not going to go ahead and extend it on to 401. But with those 2 roads, my question is, why has it not already been pushed out, the 401 bypass? Why has it not already been pushed out?
Mr. Dean, I'll try to answer that for you.
Okay.
So, we're talking about Eastern Parkway, which is the Fuquay-Varina Parkway that we had to rename, but essentially we've had development building pieces of that. I should probably speak to the mic for those online. We've had development building pieces of that until there's enough of it built that the town can afford to tie the pieces together and make that complete. I would expect that over time, that's probably going to happen before the 55 widening that you're talking about and before this project. And so where that leaves us is with this project and the 55 project, they're going to kind of be competing to see which one needs to be built first. If I had to guess, 55 probably would be the one that's built first because it's probably going to be a cheaper project that has a lot of impact. But as we have studied this over and over again, the answer that we keep coming back to when we look at the models is based on the traffic from the development in Wake and Harnett counties, we're going to need them all. And so if we do not get this project in the hopper so that it's on the foreground, then it will never happen. We'll be at a position 25 years from now that it can't happen. That's kind of why we get criticized from both directions. If you pick up your Facebook page and you look, you're going to see a lot of comments about how the town is not planning for any future traffic. And so that's what we're trying to do here. When we go do that, obviously that's going to impact local property owners, particularly if you're on one of these routes. But unfortunately, we have to consider it. We have to get something into a plan so that we can, 30 years from now, your kids aren't looking back at us going, man, those guys back in 2020 were dumb. They didn't do anything, and now here we are. And so it's really, every bit of this is a trade-off between, how do we handle the future? How do we take care of the present? How do we fit all this together? And it's a complex piece. Just from a staff standpoint, I think from staff from the town, and I'm sure staff from Campo, just to address some of the discussion from earlier, we take very seriously who we're impacting. You may not have as ETJ people, you may not have a town commissioner But we have over and over again accommodated, talking to everybody, doing our best to try to limit the impact to everybody. I mean, unfortunately with these road projects, I mean, essentially the request of please stay off of my property just means it's the next property over. So there's no way we can account for this traffic without impacting somebody. There's just no way around it. So what we're trying to do, what Mike's talked about a lot is, you've got a 200-foot right-of-way on a road. We're going to do our best to try to make that as little impactful as it can be on any given property. Understanding that, there's going to be properties impacted. There's just no way around that. Back to your question about your driveway, that's a very specific question that usually gets answered when you have a road design in hand. And so at that time, DOT would go and say, okay, we're going to cut access off here. We have to. So we've got to give this property access somewhere else. And they'll start working towards that end. They'll come up with a solution. It will probably involve some kind of access and may even involve compensation for the change in your access. All of that's going to be in a big, all of that is evaluated when you get to that point. At the point we're at right now, we're trying to get to a point where we've got something that the public can stand behind that we can do for the future so that, again, 30 years from now, we're not Atlanta. We're not bound up in a way that we can't solve it. So that's the only way, though. That's the best I can answer those questions, but I hope that helps.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate your comment right there. So I'm going to end this by saying, just keep in mind, you got Highway 55, you got the Fuqua Expressway, Parkway, whatever you want to call it. Just keep in mind to push it out because you got roads to be built now. And really, if you drew the Parkway up there, it would be very close to some of these lines. Thank you.
Meredith, if you want to go ahead and come on up again.
Developing our land, or to even why would I even want to build anything like another horse farm or another barn on my property if I know it's going to get taken over? So, so they say, oh, it's a 2050 plan, but it impacts all of us, and so that was my only point of that. Is everybody's like, oh, it's so far in the future, but it's not really when it impacts our saleability or are able to develop, or if it's going to be cut up into portions like the last speaker, that it's going to be chopped up, for the access. That was my only point. Thank you very much.
I think the gentleman has a message well received tonight in regards to the impact of the map and where this has been from in the past. And I think that definitely the message from the motion I made with Campo and the Campo board directing them to study alternate routes to the south and the east, and Old Stage Road has been discussed, is clearly understood by these gentlemen here, and so that will be coming back to the executive board. Yes, sir.
I'm Donald Morris, 1901 Buck Road Road, Fuquay-Varina. If you want to pull that up, let's see here. I'm in the B1, B2, and B5 area.
The next one.
Right next to the gentleman that you're just talking to. And I saw on that screen there, y'all had something about to keep the character and the quality of life. I mean, I don't know how that's going to be character and quality of life. The reason everybody who comes to this area is so nice. And the property I'm on is something you have to go to the mountains and see. And do you remember me, Kenneth? Did you ride by my property?
Sure did.
Okay. How can anybody justify putting a road through something like that? That should be embraced. There's eagles, all kind of wildlife. We've got mountain woodpeckers over there. I mean, just any kind of thing you can think of, okay? But this is scenery. And the city limits is right across the street. How's that a bypass? Like everybody says, it needs to keep going further on out. Y'all going to destroy everything here for a road that needs to be moved further out and a less desirable part of the county. You know what I'm saying? That one area that you rode through, is that not amazing? And you're going to put a road through there and destroy it and go through all those ponds? I mean, I don't get it. And like I say, the schools are right there too. I mean, it needs to go further back. It's common sense. I mean, it needs to be off the, I mean, it doesn't need to be up there no more. That's all I'm going to say, short and sweet.
You do have people on the line that would like to speak. You want to let them have a chance to speak that are online?
One more standing up right here.
Okay. The online people are
Malin Dupree, 8104 Watermite Road. I'm just like Thomas. That line, it goes right through my farm. It don't touch no property lines. Goes through a hayfield, pond, and a house where my daughter lives. I'm like the other gentleman. I don't want road. Folks in that bigger area, letting them leave home a little bit earlier. I know we need some stuff done, but it looks like 55 would widen. That would be the first priority. And earlier talking about 6 lane in 401, I don't see where that's any good. And then you bottle it down to 2 lanes or 4 lanes. It just runs into a bottleneck. I think it needs to go more east, and Old Stage Road, I think, would be a good spot. Everybody talking about going to be 4 lane. Well, like me, that would be one of the first things to do. 4 lane that, you done got part of the road built, and then see what you needed from that. If you moved it out and done that first, and then widened 55, they've been 4 lane and 42 for the last 40 years, and it's still a 2 lane road. Was when I came up here. So I don't understand why we need a bypass this close into town. To me, it doesn't make any sense to me, which I'm not no engineer, but just common sense. And going to put that in before you even widen 55, and it's killing me, just like Thomas. It's going through my farm. I got 40 by 180 foot hay barn I won't even be able to get to. And if they come and take the hay fields and the water keep me from irrigating, I don't reckon I'll need no barn, because I won't have nothing to put in it. But what I'm just asking y'all to do, if you would, look at moving it out, because I think it's way in too close. And I think you said you're looking at 15, 20 years. That's, to me, I would think 20 years from now it'd be outdated before it ever got built. It'd be like Judd Parkway. They 2-laned it, and by the time they got it built, it was outdated and needed to be 4 lane. And I just think it's way too close in. It needs moving out. And we need to save some farmland too. You got folks coming, like Teresa said earlier, they got to eat. Well, you can't grow it on the shelf in food line. You got to have dirt to grow food. And folks got to eat, whether they want to or not. Thank you for y'all's time.
Excuse me, sir. I just want to make sure I got your name and address. I just want to make sure I got it correct.
Malin Dupree, 8104 Watermite Road.
You got a couple people online. You want to go ahead and catch those online that have been waiting for quite some time on there? Okay, Scott, you want to handle that?
Yes, sir. Elizabeth Parent, please unmute your mic, state your name and address for the record.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Elizabeth Parent. I live at 8620 Jordan Meadow Drive, Fuquay-Varina. So my property is it's located off of Parkway Road by the intersection of Parkway and Angier. And I want to say that that I would recommend that you guys stick as close to existing roads as possible. I am the daughter of farmers, granddaughter of farmers. I was raised on a dairy and cattle farm out in Washington State, and a lot of my family up in Pennsylvania have large hay farms as well. And just knowing the impacts when you see basic development, a house going up where you used to have special memories with your family. I have very fond memories picking blackberries with my aunt and my grandma in certain spots on that farm I grew up on, where there is now a house where a dog does its business and someone has a toilet. And there's memories that are lost when you build something on special land. And when you have a road going straight through your primary source of income, that is devastating. And so I would recommend that you stick as close to existing roads as possible. The property I currently live out off of Purfoy, this last fall, I went and visited a farm that's just north of my house, off of Purfoy, the Rodriguez's farm, and I drove up and I almost cried. It brought back so many special memories for me of the way I was raised on the farm, and it's something that you cannot get back. Once it's gone, it is gone. And farmland, farm and agriculture, it's what puts food on our tables. It's what puts food for our kids. It's what it feeds the next generation. If we put a road on it, that land is gone. And that's something that we need to preserve, protect, support, and encourage. And unfortunately, because of the public's lack of trust in the procedure that is taken in this procedure, the lack of trust from the public, it's losing a lot of the generational farmers. It's losing people in my generation. I'm 27 years old, and something I couldn't go farm because I can't go out and buy land here because I can't trust that there's not going to be a bypass. I can't trust that there's not going to be a massive road being built straight through it in 10, 20 years. Where's the investment in that? It's a difficult decision. Bottom line, please stick to roads that are already existing. Thank you.
Okay, we have another hand raised. Christy, please unmute your mic. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Christina Lewis, and my residence is 7915 Panther Lake Road in Willow Spring. And my question is, can you guys provide further mapping with detailed roads and everything? Because my parents own land on Walter Myatt Road, and we have our business on Twin Oaks Feed and Supply at Walter Myatt and Kennebec intersection, and just looking at the maps, it's just, we can't really tell exactly where these proposed alternate studies and things are.
I mean, we as part of this project, the maps that we have online, is this on? Okay, I just want to make sure. The maps we have online, you can go on those and zoom in, and if you need more detail, you just need to let us know. But
okay, I mean, we looked at the maps, we just, even zooming in, it didn't, and other people I've talked to said you can't see the exact type of property lines or exact roads for the alternate routes, being studied.
Yeah, I mean, we as part of this project, when we got into the next phase, we were going to have even better scalable maps for when we got down to the selection of alignments. And so the plan is before the end of this that you will see we'll be able to see a kind of a more scalable map.
Okay, thank you. I'd hope so, because again, it can be also very detrimental to us as we're actively farming and a business too. So we definitely would wish, not to see our properties impacted as well. So please, as well, stick to the proposed roads as close as you can. Thank you.
Okay, we have another hand raised. Katrina Graham, please unmute your mic, state your name and address for the record. Katrina Graham, please unmute your mic. All right, we're going to go on to the next person. Ginger B, please unmute your mic. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Is it working?
Yes.
My name is Virginia Bergstrom, and I live at 1839 Somerset Circle in Charleston, South Carolina. I own a farm or part of a farm in Fuquay-Varina on Sunset Lake Road. I think what I'd like to simply say is that I feel that a routes further south, further east, anything that creates a way for our community to continue to grow trees and grow crops and grow houses makes the most sense and is rooted in our identity as a town. As a resident of another area that has grown a great deal, we've been watching, I've spent my entire childhood watching the transformation of a town that had 4,000 people when I was 16 to a town that now has 35,000 people, and then to Mount Pleasant, which is my hometown here, that has now 96,000 people, which is what you're projecting for Fuquay-Varina. So what I guess I want to say is that when we think about the identity of a community, its story, its way of life is essential to its quality of life and to how generations flourish in a place. And so when we make these choices, it is not really about people's convenience so much as it's about, or the tax base or paychecks or any number of different things we can use to value a decision. But ultimately, we need to pull up to a slightly higher elevation and look at the long-term impacts. When our ancestors settled in Fuquay-Varina, it was, I think, 1760 something, and we'll face another day, another time, to talk about the 55 widening. But today we're talking about neighbors to our south and our east that need to be heard. Without representation, it's very challenging. And so it's important that we continue to encourage equilibrium, and that equilibrium, growing trees and growing crops and growing houses, is what will make Fuquay-Varina a special place to continue to be. And I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to come back to Katrina Graham. Please unmute your mic.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you. My name is Katrina Graham. I live at 113 Willow Wills Court. I'm very new to Fuquay-Varina. I've only been here since June of 2020. And part of the reason why I moved here is because I grew up in the country down in Moore County, and I was very excited to move here to the country in Wake County. I I think I'm more like the people you're trying to make these changes for, because I am a full-time telecommuter and I do commute from Fuquay-Varina into Research Triangle Park. What I can tell you from my perspective is that I would feel much better about whatever widening that's going on here, continuing to go along the routes of these existing roads. Because I have a background growing up around farmland and around farming families, I have a problem with the impact of this impacting their ability to provide for their families and provide for us as local farmers. Also, just as importantly to me, I participated in the 401 corridor study, specifically on the environmental impact. I want to make sure that we're being thoughtful and methodical about making widening these roads, because we're thinking about the impact to the environment as well. So the roads that currently exist, and certainly if we're swinging out much wider, as they're saying with this bypass, if it is not going through areas that are impacting our environment, that's what I'd like to see. I think that most of the people who are coming to Fuquay-Varina are transplants like myself, who are coming here because of a certain way of life that we were not experiencing when we've been living in Raleigh and Durham, okay? And so I'm simply asking that the Campo and you continue to make these studies, and keeping in mind that we don't want to lose the small town feel, but we are not overwhelming the environment as well. So I, again, would like to see us sticking to the existing roads, especially if we're going to be widening this. You know, part of the reason why I moved to this part of Wake County is because of what I saw as access very quickly for me, because I travel by plane, the quick access to be able to get to the airport in Raleigh, okay, to RDU. And so I thought a lot of the focus was going to be on this new 540 and these interchanges, which are already doing a great deal. Yes, it is going to connect the entirety of Wake and Durham counties, but I see the impact of what it's doing right now to these communities and these homes. I see a lot of African American families and their homes. They are losing acreage around their homes, and they don't have anyone advocating for them. And so I hope that as you're looking at this, that you're looking at the human impact in destroying what little people may already have. Okay, they may not have as much as some of, certainly as these businesses. And I would rather see these commercial properties giving up more of their land than small homeowners and farmers losing their land and their legacy for their children. And so I hope that we can continue to look at this from that perspective, keeping the whole idea that there are some people who are more impacted by this economically, and that, we make sure that we stick to these existing roads, because people, their businesses rely on this. And I hope that you'll take that into consideration moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, that is all the hands we have raised.
Thank you, everybody tonight for speaking, and the ones that have called in. I'm going to make some closing comments now. At this point, do you have something new to add?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
I did have an actual question. Thank you for your time and your ear listening. I know you've already explained how the trade-offs are weighted, but my question is about when you're measuring the properties impacted, agricultural land impacted, environmental impact, and the cost, is that based on those impacts today, or those impacts in 2045 when the population is projected to be 94,000, as you said?
Well, the impacts are based on data.
Yeah.
So it's what we see today. I mean, it's, if it's for farmland, it's acreage. For, environmental features, it's amount of acres of environmental features. I mean, most of that data probably won't, if nothing changes, the data won't change.
Right. So I think since you have indicated to us that things will change, I would like to ask if you can incorporate the data of the future, of projections of what would be the properties impacted in 2045, what would be the environmental cost in 2045. That data might help you see or put into a perspective what everyone else has said already tonight about moving south and east.
So just to clarify what I said, cost, we are looking at future costs.
Yeah.
So that I mean, because we're really bound. We're not saying the actual number of cost is more expensive or not. You know, we're comparing the costs. So that's variable into the future. Of course, the costs are always going to go up.
Yeah.
But we are looking at traffic into the future. So I want to make sure you understand that when we look at actual data on properties, if the properties don't change, that data's not going to change. The traffic data will change.
Yes.
The models that we're working with will change. The socioeconomic data will change. We're looking at all of that. So all of that is taken into account in our data. So we are looking at future conditions.
Thank you. And I apologize, I didn't give my name.
Yeah, that's right.
Nathan Bullock, and address is 1808 Bass Lake Road in Fuquay-Varina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you say Bass Lake Road?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First of all, I want to make some comments. And one, Town of Fuquay-Varina has a website, drivefv.org. That's correct website address, correct? That shows a variety of projects that are in Fuquay-Varina's plans and control to address traffic improvements. And some of these are projects that have been discussed tonight, and they show you some funding and some timelines and some guided direction of them. So comments I want to make sure that I understand as a voting, I'm the only one up here that's a voting member of Campo in regards to this right here. As was mentioned earlier, who makes up Campo's executive board. And this here is staff that makes recommendations to us, and which are very important recommendations, as this is an important issue in our community, in our surrounding area. I've lived in Mom and Dad moved to Fuquay-Varina from Raleigh when I was 2 years old, so I remember when there's a lot more farms, and those of you that live on the farms remember it longer than I remember it when I was 2 years old. But riding my horse across farms, and throughout, I kept a horse at one point in Willow Springs, and also at Valentine Farm on Sunset Lake Road, and so I understand what you're saying and have sympathy for your concerns right here. And all of this is taken under consideration with what's going on in regards to the 401 bypass. The south and east directions that have been expressed tonight, that's been expressed multiple times for Campo to study that, and Campo staff to study that and bring back recommendations along with my motion that was unanimously voted upon at the December meeting, which was my first Campo meeting as mayor of Fuquay-Varina. And also studying existing roads, which is often the old stage road that has been discussed. And so I know that they're studying that. Once all this information goes through, and this continues to be a process, there will be a report made in different directions. So not a single one of these paths or new paths have been settled on or done tonight. Your comments are important, are very important to be made for my decision and the rest of Campo's board. As I shared with you earlier tonight, I have not made up my mind. Just because there's a line drawn on the map, I have not picked one and said that's the path that we're going on. And so your feedback was not wasted tonight. It was heard definitely by these guys here, and they will be using that to make recommendations. In fact, you also mentioned show the data, and they will come back to the Campo board and show the data that they're using and how they come up with their ultimate decision. I'm confident that they have heard that tonight and have heard it before from the board at our March meeting, that report will be made. And that is a public meeting. Anyone here can, the probably still be online meetings, including the members, log on online. But you can log on also and pay attention to be a part of that meeting. I appreciate you coming here tonight. Please know, like I said earlier, this was not a waste of your time. It's an important meeting, and you have not fallen on deaf ears by me tonight or anybody else up here tonight. So thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. And thank you, Campo, for choosing to come down here. As I asked you, and as I mentioned earlier to everybody in this room, I invited y'all and asked y'all to come down here. And thank you for taking that invitation, because you could have told us no and not came. And so we appreciate you coming down here too tonight, answering some questions. I know you felt the passion from everybody in this room. So everybody, have a good evening.